now, as they were held for a while on the grid, and that gives a good opportunity for Colin Noble to make a fantastic jump into La Source for the first time. It's Noble who leads, also trying to squeeze through is Johan Scheer. There's a little bit of bumping and barging, but they all seem to be cleanly through, and then sprinting down towards Eau Rouge, and it is Colin Noble who leads. Second place, Alex Capaldi. Third is Johan Scheer. Fourth, Andrew Ferguson. Fifth is Tony Wells as they approach one of the most legendary corners on the calendar.
Yeah, Noble all fired up. I mean, only just stepped out of the GT Open GT3 Radical a few minutes ago, so he's obviously well aware of what the track's capable of doing, and has already stolen much and is pulling away already. Look at that gap.
Certainly is, and that is a good couple, well, 1.4 seconds, as in the Super Sport class it is Marco Ciancetti, not unsurprisingly, who is making the early running. They will have a pit window to explain between the 20th and 30th minute of the race, and the length of time they spend in the pits is determined by their success seconds, which will vary depending on how well they've performed in preceding races. Due to a slight technical issue, we can't give you the full breakdown of success seconds, except to say, of course, the drivers that were at the very sharp end last time round, Alex Capaldi and Manthalalos, are going to be in the pits for quite a while. Yeah,
so they'll be stationary for 80 seconds versus Tony Wells and James Littlejohn will be
stationary for 85.
Yeah, that's right. So you know, that's 85 is the most that anybody will be carrying. The bulk of the field are still around about the 45 or 50 second mark. So you know, that's really going to shake up. And as we've seen so many times through this and previous seasons, you know, you've got that situation where professional drivers are out of position further down the order than they'd expect to be because of those success seconds, and you get a thrilling battle as they fight their way back up through.
I think the key here at Spa, though, is you can overtake, and that is the real beauty of this circuit, and that means that even if the success seconds do work against you, but you can still recover it very nicely. Ricardo Donut busy having a scrap with Ivan Lukasevich, one of the Russian pairing that we've got in the field.
One of the other great things about Spa as well is because it's so reliant on horsepower and straight line speed, is it does seem to level up the pros and the more amateur drivers. You don't get the same difference in performance between the relatively experienced and inexperienced drivers as you do at some other circuits.
Yeah, and also a lot of the turns, I'm being slightly crude to say they're hang on and hope type turns, but they're turns which if you're brave enough, they're not quite as much of a differential as well between the pros and the amateur drivers, that you get a more technical circuit, which are all third gear corners, where it really does come down to technique. No,
it's true that line is a little bit less important here than ultimately a good setup and a stable car, something that's stable under braking and means you can get on the power nice and early.
Meanwhile, Marco Ciancetti and Jim Booth busy doing battle, and this is what we thought might happen at the start of race one, which is one of the SR3s really beginning to get into mix with some of the cars at the sharp end of the field. But I was really impressed with how Jim went earlier on today, because at Estoril it felt like it was a bit of a struggle for him, but he seems to have gone away, thought about it a lot, and has made a massive leap in performance this weekend.
Yeah, and even managed to pick up a Fangio trophy, winning the bargain in that first race. But yeah, I think he's better suited. Found it more comfortable on the high speed sweeps and turns of this Ardennes circuit than he did in the heat of Estoril.
Mind you, it's slightly less comfortable to have Marco Ciancetti bobbing and weaving at your heel, and that is what he has got at the moment. But then Booth, I mean, what I love about the Spider is that is a car with so much punch. It's just you put your right foot down and it rockets.
Yeah, you really see it off the exits, don't you? Off the apexes and the drive particularly. Oh, good move there by Ciancetti.
But on the brake,
looks like he caught Booth napping there under the brakes, and Ciancetti really has been given a brilliant fight here between that's Ricardo Donor and
Ivan Lukasevich, and Lukasevich put in the effort in, but the Russian driver couldn't quite find a way around the outside of Ricardo Donor, and Donor holds on, and now is getting or was going to close up to Jim Booth, but Booth will be off in pursuit of Marco Ciancetti in the Spider.
These lead SR3 drivers have really given the Spiders and the SR8s something to think about during the weekend, because their second sector performance is just so stellar with the medium speed corners and the various complexes here, that they're I mean, indeed Ciancetti was the fastest in the second sector in qualifying. out of the entire field.
And whereas the Spider has got such punch out of the corners, the SR3's got a braking distance you measure in millimetres, because someone like Marco Ciancetti, he almost brakes as he gets into the corner, and because of the level of aerodynamic grip, can just really negotiate the corner at such high speed. Meanwhile, Ivan Lukasevich coming back at Riccardo Dona as Jim Booth powers past Marco Ciancetti on the run down to Eau Rouge, and then Booth will enjoy the run along the Kemmel Straight to further extend his advantage on the SR3. So Lukasevich comes back at Riccardo Dona, but Dona, we have seen time and time again already this season, is not an easy driver to find a way past.
No, he's one of the drivers in the field that's got a really robust defence, and very, very experienced racer, not so much in radicals, but certainly he's got a lot of experience in various disciplines, and in this case it looks like Lukasevich just had enough drive to pass him fairly easily into Legumes.
Yeah, it wasn't the case of letting him through, was it, either, for Riccardo Dona? And now, can Lukasevich pull clear, or is Riccardo Dona going to come back onto his tail? We're still in the early exchanges here. 50-minute race. We are just over 6 minutes in.
Now for the SR3 races at Spa, really gearing is an absolutely critical part of the setup as well, because particularly on that long drive uphill through Kemmel, it can be a bit of a lottery, particularly with your setup, to decide whether to go for a sort of a medium or a medium-long gearing arrangement, and maybe we're just seeing a little bit of that influence there.
Yeah, it's a good point actually, because the last thing you want to be, or there's nothing more frustrating as a driver if you're bouncing off the rev limiter at the end of a long straight, but sometimes for the greater good of the lap time, that's what you need to do.
Well, because it's an uphill grade, the SR3s just slightly struggle at the top end just to pull that final gear on the, because it's such a steep uphill grade, and really the camera doesn't show that, but you know, obviously with the shorter gearing, you're compromised elsewhere around the course, so it's a bit of a lottery.
We've got a black and white flag already for John Caldwell for not obeying the track limits. It's good to see John out on the grid, because if you didn't join us earlier, we reverse parked into the tyre barrier at the top of Radion, and the mechanics doing a great job to get John back out into the fray. And he is currently in 14th position. So Colin Noble leads the way, Alex Capadia is second, Johan Scheer is third, fourth is James Winslow and John Corbett's entry, fifth is Tony Wells, sixth Andrew Ferguson, seventh is Jim Booth, and Ivan Lukasevich has already got onto terms here with Marco Ciancetti. Now Lukasevich is in the SR3, so this is the battle for the SR3 class lead, and you may well have uncovered a little bit of a gem here, Will, because he's mixing one of the very best in the business.
This is Radical GP team. This is their first European Masters event, well, their first Radical Championship event at all. So they've obviously got that car set up exactly to his liking, and he's able to attack somebody who's got a wealth of experience and has always started here in Ciancetti.
So they head on to the Kemmel Straight once more, and Lukasevich has got the benefit as well of the slipstream effect behind Marco Ciancetti. Ciancetti, now that's experience, he just holds his line. He makes Ivan Lukasevich do it the hard way, looks to the outside. Ivan having that, says Ciancetti. He sticks to the racing line, and therefore he holds on to the lead of the Supersport class, 8th place overall. But as they battle, of course, it's going to bring Riccardo Dona into the mix as well. So the top three cars in the Supersport class, very closely matched on the track. Then there's a gap back to Brian Caldwell, the fourth of the Supersport runners. Fifth Supersport is Martin Verity, then Aaron Bailey and John Caldwell. Down towards Pouhon. Ivan Lukasevich trying to do something about Marco Ciancetti. He can't at the moment. And you can see, since the race this morning, just how much the track has rubbered in as well. We've had Formula V8 3.5 cars, we've had the Euro Formula Open, GT Open cars as well, all racing in the intervening period. And they are big, powerful cars. And therefore the drivers will be finding a little bit the grip levels have changed, but really the track in about peak condition.
Yeah, and the temperature has got noticeably warmer than it was this morning as well. It's an absolutely glorious day here at Spa. You know, really unlike your typical conditions at Spa with changeable weather. It's really quite warm.
Well, the word is that changeable weather is going to exercise its right to change overnight. As I look at my infallible weather predicting tool, and yes, it suggests that tomorrow we might have a degree of inclemency. Meanwhile, at the front of the field, Colin Noble is doing a great job here of keeping Alex Capalia at bay, and Noble and Abbott are looking at 15 seconds less in the pits as well compared to Kapadia and Alos, so this could play out quite nicely. And this is a track that Colin Noble seems to be really enjoying. In the GT Open race earlier on, he was looking very impressive in the Radical RXC.
Yeah, a lot of experience with high downforce cars, most recently in Formula Renault, but previous to that with Radical in the SR3 and the SR1, which is where he started his car racing career in the Radical SR1 Cup, and he was the inaugural champion of that all the way back in 2013. And yeah, a real sort of young Scottish motorsport talent, somebody I think you should definitely be watching for the future. He's undoubtedly got a very good long career in sports car racing or single seaters, whatever he decides to do in the future. And
one of many SR1 Cup graduates on the grid this weekend, and the classes of 2013-14 begin to come to fruition, but that will have piqued the interest of Brian Poulter, the race director, all four wheels over the white line, and he'll be wanting to make sure he avoids a warning flag.
Yeah, and indeed that's also given Kapadia a little bit of a chance to pull a few tenths from him there. And yeah, already he's up in level terms here. I just wonder if you start to feel the pressure of Kapadia now in this lap.
Yeah, all it takes is one mistake, and for someone like Alex Kapadia, that is all you need for a driver of his calibre, his experience, to start pouncing.
And that's the big danger with Pouon, because there's so much runoff as you're trying to maintain speed. It's easy to forget that that's adding such a long distance extra onto your corner if you run out wide, that any car following you can gain many metres on you.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Because these tarmac runoff areas, they don't end your race in the way that a gravel track would, but what they do mean is driving extra metres, which in some categories, like this one, does tend to punish you when the cars are evenly matched and the gaps between them are not that substantial. So we are about to we are 8 minutes away or so from the pit window opening, so that's another 4 laps.
Interestingly there though, Noble was actually able to respond on that last lap, and indeed fastest lap, the 2:19.6, so even with that mistake he still managed to keep Kapadia honest.
And Kapadia not able to challenge him yet for the lead of the race. Now, how much of this is Kapadia and Alos playing the long game with the championship? Because the other thing to watch here is that Kapadia is already 30 seconds clear of Tony Wells, who's his main championship rival. But the driver I'm surprised that isn't in this mix is Johan Scheer. I would have expected him to be closer than 15, 16 seconds.
Yeah, he doesn't really seem to have made any great inroads. Last lap there, a 2:24. I'm just wondering if he's maybe struggling a little bit with setup in the...
Did you see the thick black lines being laid down by Colin Noble as he accelerated out of the Bruxelles hairpin? The car sideways. It was something you'd more associate with another Scottish motorsport icon, Colin McRae, than circuit racing. But again, Kapadia not able to take any advantage.
No, although it looks like he's lining up now for a pass possibly into Fagna. No, looks
yes.
He looks one side, looks the other way. Oh, that's a spin for Kapadia.
That's very uncharacteristic for Alex Kapadia. He was just thinking about making the move and pushed a little bit too hard. It was a gap that was always closing, but I think if you were to watch back the race tapes of the 2013 Radical SR1 Cup, you'll have seen that Colin Noble was from his very start in motorsport always been a difficult man to overtake.
Yeah, and here we just see a replay of that move again. Looks to the outside, looks to the inside, but Noble's got that line very well covered, and
yeah, nothing untoward there at all.
No,
really,
not at all.
I think it was more that Kapadia thought the gap was going to open. When it didn't, it was just a case of getting the car stopped, and that didn't happen.
Well, that means he's got the work all to do again now, though.
It does, and this is probably going to be a truer sense now of actually Kapadia's true pace, because he's in some clear air, and if he can close down what's going to be a fairly hefty advantage here for Colin Noble of, we wait, 9.4 seconds. If he can close that down before the pit stops, then we...
Of course, the difficulty then, of course, is that if he's going to have to use those tyres and use more of that fuel, is what effect it's going to have for Manhal Ollas in the latter stages of the race. You know, particularly when the track is warm and he's pushing so hard, Manhal Ollas is going to have to do the same as well with that pit stop deficit. This is going to hurt the race really pretty severely. All the while, it's also, of course, allowed Johan Scheer to gain a bit of a gain as well. So he's now equally 9 seconds adrift of Kapadia.
what about this battle behind Ivan Lukasevich and Marco Ciancetti? As they were, this is the fight for the lead of the Supersport class, and the drivers enjoying the nice run along these straights into the clear, fresh air, which cools them down a bit. The greenhouse from which we're commentating doesn't offer such luxury as pack arrive at the foot of Eau Rouge and then climb out of Radion. And this, a good run from Lukasevich once more. He gets in the tow behind Marco Ciancetti, but what Ciancetti is just a master of is putting the car in exactly the right place. This time around, it's the middle of the road. Lukasevich isn't quite close enough to make the move stick to the inside. He shows himself to the inside of Ciancetti. But again, it's almost like a Formula 3 car. Because the braking distance is so short, you need to be at least some way alongside before you look to turn into Les Combes.
And what you see from Ciancetti as well is he's so good at judging the distance between him and the car behind that as soon as he detects that there's a possibility of the car behind getting a tow, he can immediately move aside and all that advantage is lost. So he's really timing it to perfection to just move over onto the line for the next corner just as the other car's about to get a slingshot.
And all the while, Jim Booth doing a pretty good job, I'd suggest, of managing that gap as well, because he, having swapped places with Ciancetti in the early running, he's been able to just maintain that buffer over Ciancetti for the past couple of laps, aided somewhat, of course, by the fact Ciancetti's mirrors have been filled by Ivan Lukasevich. Of course, as I say that, Ciancetti gets onto terms with Booth. Booth has got Andrew Ferguson just ahead of him. That's the 6th place car, Ferguson. This is the fight for 7th, 8th and 9th, and the lead of the Supersport class. And every time that Ciancetti gets up to Booth, it gives Lukasevich the chance to look to the inside of Stavilo, which he almost is able to translate into a successful manoeuvre, but it doesn't quite work out. A pair of them then run in tandem on towards Blanchimont. Come out of Blanchimont and then towards the bus stop chicane. Lukasevich looking very anxious to get away through here, but interestingly, although the Russian driver's really hustling Ciancetti, he's not taking unnecessary risks. He's not just launching to the inside line and chancing his luck. No,
both of them showing a great deal of maturity here in maintaining the line. Look how close he is this time. Is he going to look for maybe a no? Looks to the outside and then for the switch around and maybe come along on the inside. No, again, not quite close enough to make the pass at the source. But yeah, a great deal of maturity from these two drivers to give themselves just enough space. And of course, all the while he's conserving the car, conserving those tyres by driving in this way.
Exactly, we are only a couple of moments away from the pit window opening, and I genuinely have no idea how the remainder of this race is going to pan out, because the gaps that have opened have been predictable. It really depends on the pace of some of these cars a little bit later on. I'd also suggest it was probably John Corbett who has started that car. It was James Winslow, because he's some 34.5 seconds back, which seems like, again, an awful lot of ground to give away if that were James Winslow at the wheel.
Yeah, and you can see this this battle going all the way as well. And we'll be interesting to see how equally matched it'll be when Maritiotto hands over from or takes over from Ciancetti, and likewise Konstantin from Ivan. Yeah,
Konstantin Gunkayev in the first race wasn't quite as quick as Ivan Lukasevich.
Oh, just in a replay here, that looks like
that was John Caldwell,
isn't it? Yes. Yeah.
Who unfortunately continues his day of slight spins here at Spa. But nonetheless, John, well, he actually did lose a place from that. That was to Yanni Herpia, who found a way past him. But what we've got is a lot of very quick drivers waiting in the wings in the pits, ready for their opportunity. To explain once more, in the Radical European Masters, you have to go past the pit open board when the pit window opens, and therefore there is a little bit of a pause from the pit window opening between the pit stops actually happening. But what's going to be really interesting here is I think that we're going to see some of the cars a little bit lower down the field going past that board, whilst the front runners not. And again, that starts to have a little bit of a strategic bearing on things as they begin to unfold. So on the brakes into the bus stop chicane. Marco Ciancetti continues to lead the Supersport class in the race overall as we're 20 minutes in. Colin Noble leads. Second place, Alex Kapadia. Third, Johan Scheer. Fourth, John Corbett. Fifth is Tony Wells. Sixth, Andrew Ferguson. Seventh is Jim Booth. We're watching the fight for eighth and ninth between Ciancetti and Lukasiewicz. They lead the Supersport class from Ricardo Dona in 10th place. Then it's Brian Caldwell, Martin Verity, Aaron Bailey, Yanni Herpia, John Caldwell, Mark Schrader, Mohamed Jawa, and then Jean Gandar, who completes the field and I think has unfortunately ducked into the pits. Here is our race leader, Colin Noble. And so far this has been an excellent day for the Spiders. Jeremy Ferguson didn't quite take the win earlier on, but I suspect that whatever issues plagued him in those last couple of laps have been identified and resolved for this one.
Yeah, it looks like something akin to possibly even running out of fuel. But yeah, I think this is the first time that we've seen sort of the real pace, the true showing of the pace of these new RXC Spiders. Of course, new for this year with the 3.5 litre Ford EcoBoost twin turbo engine, somewhere in the region of 600 horsepower, and a real genuine LMP pace car.
Said it last time, I'll say it again, we can't judge that until one's delivered to my house. As Noble comes on the brakes, down through the gears, and this is going to complete lap 9. He will see that the pit lane is open, but I suspect that Colin Noble, they're pretty much going to have to throw the pit board at him to get him to come in, because I imagine that he is enjoying himself enormously at the wheel of the car.
Well, while things are going good, it would certainly make sense to keep him in the car as long as possible. That last lap, a 2:21.2 versus a 2:22.3 from Kapadia. So yeah, as long as he keeps doing what he's doing, I can see that the team will run him as long as they can.
And what pit stops always offer is unpredictables. Although you can drill it and practice it as much as possible, it's always slightly out of your control. There was a quick glimpse of Mohamed Jawa, one of the Saudi Arabian drivers that we've got in the field. And he is potentially the first driver to be lapped by Colin Noble. Noble's lead over Alex Kapadia, in fact, has gone up. So it's 11.0 seconds. Kapadia then 18 seconds clear of Johan Scheer. And it's just very odd to see Scheer so far off the pace, because he was so spectacular in Estoril, but it hasn't quite hooked up that way for him today. My only hypothesis could be that maybe they've put a bit more downforce on the car just to give Alain Costa some confidence through the high-speed corners. Yeah,
sadly it wasn't something that we really got to see the benefits of in the first race, but perhaps they'll manifest themselves in this one.
Now, who are we going to start to see ducking into the pits? It's going to be the end of this lap when we're going to start to find out. Noble is through and on his way. Again, the chance to admire photosynthesis. Here comes Alex Kapadia. And Kapadia in second place. So uncharacteristic to see him make that sort of mistake and have a spin. And I guess it suggests to me, Will, that Alex clearly was anxious to prove the point to get through, and was possibly a bit closer to the limit than maybe we'd assumed he was.
Yeah, certainly a very different performance from of course his race 1 win, but yeah, they can have a real uphill battle in the second half, particularly when they're carrying all those success seconds as well.
But we've still got over half of the race remaining. But you have to say, for Colin Noble and James Abbott, as long as the pit stop proceeds without issue, as long as the car runs well in the second half of the race, it's hard to see that anybody is going to be able to chase them down in the second phase of the race.
Yeah, as both Noble and Kapadia have gone through for another lap, so yeah, this race continues, but no, it's far from over, and as we saw in the first race, it can all turn on its head in just the last handful of laps.
Wait to see if Johan Scheer or John Corbett duck pitward on this occasion. And also good that haven't had the intrusion of a safety car like we did a little bit earlier on. Kapadia runs downhill into Eau Rouge. The third place car, Johan Scheer, comes past us now. It is Johan at the wheel. I'm not convinced all is as it should be with that car. His last lap was a 2 minutes 25.2, which into the pit lane. Meanwhile, we have got John Corbett, and it is John at the wheel of the 69 car. We've also got in Tony Wells to hand over to James Littlejohn. It will be James Winslow who takes over from John Corbett.
Yeah, well, the blue and white SR8 is of Wells and Littlejohn is, of course, the car that's carrying the most success seconds here, courtesy of their success in Estoril. So they'll be stationary for an agonising 85 seconds.
Also into the pits is James Winslow. He unhooks as here comes the Supersport battle between Marco Ciencetti and Ivan Lukasevich. Lukasevich looks to the outside. Ciencetti covers the inside line. The pair of them run through the hairpin. The source continuing this scrap for Supersport lead. Also into the pits is Jim Booth. Booth comes to a halt. He will need to get out before the fuel can get in, and I suspect the Spiders will have learnt their lesson of just risk another couple of litres here or there to make certain. And this has been a really intriguing battle between Lukasevich and Ciencetti, because Ivan Lukasevich has been glued behind Ciencetti like this for quite some while. Ciencetti has been completely unflustered by it all, but also Lukasevich has been able to drive through with apparent ease the turbulent air behind Ciencetti's car.
Yeah, that's right. He just hasn't been able to just have enough of a car length, enough of a slingshot to make actually any of those moves stick. You know, I think you find that he's just about reaching top speed at the end of Kemmel, and it's pretty much the same as Ciencetti. He just can't quite get that extra car length or even half a car length he needs to take the advantage and just wrestle sort of the possession into the corner.
We also saw Team Ferguson having a pit lane. Our understanding is it's Andrew Ferguson doing the whole race, and then they'll probably share for the final race of the weekend tomorrow morning. Also in, we have
Mark Crader.
Mark Crader.
Yeah, taking on some fluids. And in the background, that's Brian Caldwell as well. So yeah, most of the mid-pack Supersports now coming in. This is going to be interesting as they're also fighting for position further down the order.
I saw a sticker on the car for Mark Crader, the 1000th SR3.
Yeah, indeed. He's he was the lucky recipient of the 1000th SR3 back in January now. So that's Radical's best-selling model in production since 2001. And yeah, sure enough, there's chassis 1000 that he races.
Well, I was seeing on social media earlier this afternoon that Simon Hulton, sometimes of this parish, was out on the streets with one earlier today.
Yeah, photo shoot for Radical Sweden. They've taken to the streets for a magazine feature today. So yeah, that'll be covered in the Scandinavian media. And I understand a few of the Scandinavian drivers from the Swedish Cup are going to go and come over and join us once again later in the season. So it'll be great to have them back on the grid.
Now, not to wish to critique in any way Radical sports cars. Not a car for the Scandinavian winter, I think we can say, the SR3. More for the summer. No,
although the SL does come with a heater, so and there's not many open track day cars that can say that. But no, you're absolutely right. But it's always been a really popular championship, the Swedish Championship. In fact, it was our longest running overseas series, as we just see the Russian duo entering the pits now for their handover.
So Ivan Lukasevich hands over to Konstantin Gudkayev, as Alex Kapadia continues on his way. Colin Noble, Alex Kapadia, Johan Scheer and Marco Ciencetti all yet to make their pit stops. Aaron Bailey, the only other driver who hasn't made his pits, actually Mohammed Jawa also hasn't ducked in to pass over to Faisal Bin Laden. Kapadia 10.4 seconds back from Colin Noble. He's got James Littlejohn now behind him, giving him hurry-uppers now into the pit lane for Colin Noble to pass over to James Abbott. Let's hope for the race leaders that this is a fairly smooth pit stop as Noble runs his way along the pit straight here at Spa-Francorchamps. And he just needs to find a way around Konstantin Gudkayev, which he does without any drama. And yes, appreciably more fuel, I think, about to go into the Spider than there was some of the Spiders earlier on.
Oh, there's a problem here. I think he might have overshot the pit box slightly.
Ah, and what does that mean in terms of... Meanwhile...
Things don't see... Yes, a little bit of drama in the pit lane there. Yeah, I think he was just caught off guard by the release of the Russian SR3, and he just missed the pit box.
Also in was Alex Kapadia, hand over to Manhalos, and here is James Littlejohn, who is essentially racing those cars that are currently static in the pit lane. And for James Littlejohn and Tony Wells, this weekend really having leapt up to the championship lead so spectacularly in Estoril with those 2 victories, this weekend is all about consolidating. It's a long way to be the Radical European Masters champion. Some weekends you're always going to be winning the races, other weekends particularly if you're managing the success seconds, you just need to see how events come to you, but always make sure you bring the car home and in the top 5 wherever possible.
Yes, we've seen so many times. It's all about consistency and just ensuring you can't afford a DNF or a lowly finish. You've just got to keep notching up those wins, keep notching up the podiums, and it gives you more options when you get to the end of the season. At least you've got some more flexibility and rolling the dice if you need to.
Cars swing through Fagna as Manhal Alos exits the pit lane. Marco Cenchetti hands over to Marcello Maratiotto, and here is James Abbott. So whatever the issue they had in the pits seems to have been resolved in terms of getting James up and out onto the track. And where is he in relation to Manhal Alos? We'll find out in due course. Mark Crader is clear of him. Faisal bin Laden just behind him as the pit window is closed. We've got a penalty for John Caldwell, 15-second stop and go penalty for speeding in the pit lane. It's really not been John's day, has it?
No, he didn't know at all with it. A DNF after he unfortunately parked it into the barrier at the top of Radion, and then for that penalty as well. It's a tough weekend for Caldwell indeed.
But that is sometimes the way that the breaks go in motorsport. At the end of this lap, we'll get a sense of the race order and what sort of advantage James Abbott has got to manage over the remaining 18 minutes of this race. The asphalt behind him would suggest it's a reasonably substantial one, and this is exactly what they'll have wanted, which is actually to have a reasonably comfortable buffer, because then you can manage the car, then you can drive within the car, then you're not risking fuel consumption. You just determine your agenda rather than having it pushed for you by somebody trying to chase you down.
Yeah, and the first intermediate suggests that James had already gained a second over Manhal in the first split. So it looks like that's an advantage that's going to be extended rather than diminish over the course of the remainder of the race.
Faisal bin Laden just drops a wheel over the AstroTurf as he headed on towards Stavilo, the race leader. James Abbott swinging through Francorchamps. There is the car of bin Laden. Absolutely lovely green paint scheme on that entry, as well as running very, very wide. Coming out of Blanchimont then was James Abbott, and again, you don't want to have your race victory taken away from you, do you, by a track limits violation?
No, he just needs to be a little bit careful there, doesn't he? Running sort of 2 or 3 wheels off before he rejoins the circuit. But at the moment, as we just see him crossing the line there, so doesn't appear to be Manhal within viewing distance. I don't think. We just wait for him to cross the line now.
I think it's going to be quite a long wait here for Manhal Alos in second place, we believe. Anyway, we will find out. The next car past us will be second place runner. It is Manhal Alos. He's 21.6 seconds adrift of James Abbott. So it's Abbott from Alos. Now where does this then leave Alain Costa, James Winslow, John Corbett, James Littlejohn? Still the third place car yet to pass us, and it is now. Now, is this a single-handed entry?
Oh, and a very, very wide moment there for Manhal, really. Got right out onto the rumble strips through... that would have given him a heart-stopping moment for sure, as he ran really close to the Armco through Eau Rouge.
Now, I'm guessing here that it's James Winslow who's taken over from John Corbett on the basis that car's just done its best lap of the race, so 2 minutes 23. And then James Littlejohn in fourth, 2 minutes 21, 11 seconds back. So Littlejohn and Wells could well be on for the podium here. I think that's the main podium jeopardy we've probably got to look for, is whether or not James Littlejohn can chase down to snatch third place, because Alos is 21 seconds ahead of the third place car. He's 21 seconds adrift of the race leader, which is a fairly secure second place. Yeah,
you would assume that that's a reasonably easily defendable gap. If he continues to lap at his current pace, then he's there or thereabouts. He's dropped a second to Winslow in that last sector, but otherwise he's looking pretty secure there.
Meanwhile, in the Supersport class, Maratiotto leads it from Ricardo Dona. Then it's Brian Caldwell and Martin Verity. And Brian Caldwell and Martin Verity are about to engage in the scrap. They've got Konstantin Gurkaev as well, just behind them, with 15 minutes of the race to run. And this is probably the closest scrap that we've got on track at the moment for third in the Supersport class. And actually Caldwell and Verity were very evenly matched in race one. They've got Ricardo Dona, who's not a bad yardstick to try and follow as well.
And it looks like, in fact, yeah, Verity's looking to line, and he moves out nice and early, gets the intention. He's going to get a clean. Can he hold it on the brakes? Yes, he can. And there he is, past Caldwell. Very
nicely done by Martin Verity. It was the textbook Spa move, really, wasn't it? Along the Kemmel Straight and into Les Combes. And that is good enough for third place in the Supersport class. Martin Verity, of course. Brian Caldwell, he wants to repass Verity to get back on the Supersport podium. He also wants to find a way past Ricardo Dona to win the Supersport Fangio class. And Jim Booth is the overall top-placed Fangio driver in the race at the moment, as he continues in his 7th place. We're waiting to see the shot of the 69 car, to see from the helmet whether or not it's John Corbett or James Winslow, although the sudden elevation of pace in that car suggests that either John Corbett's been playing games with us, or more likely that it is James Winslow behind the wheel. And actually, there is time yet at the rate of capture that we're seeing from the 69 car for Manhalos maybe to start just having to think about elevating his pace a little bit to make sure a second position.
Yeah, 17.8 seconds now separate Alos from Winslow. So it's not beyond the wit of man with 13.5 minutes remaining that he could catch him. And bit of a moment there, though.
Here we go. It is definitely James Winslow behind the wheel, I'm pleased to report. And it's certainly not beyond the wit of James Winslow to chase down Manhal Alos. And Winslow's last lap was a 2 minutes 22. That played a 2:26 from Manhal Alos. And so 17 seconds across 14 minutes. Stop and go penalty for John Caldwell is currently being ignored a little bit. They've given the board to his team to signal to him to come in as well for it. Here's Alain Costa in 5th place. Costa dropping back all the while from James Littlejohn. And I don't think Littlejohn is going to be able to reel in Manhalas between now and the flag, even at 5 seconds a lap. Costa in 5th, he and Johan Scheer will be picking up more championship points as a result. Of course, we do have the 3rd and final race of the Radical European Masters to come tomorrow, and that is going to be at 12:10 local time tomorrow.
Yeah, we're just seeing here. This is, Costa's been a really impressive force, certainly in the opening round at Estoril and towards the tail end of last year. He's a driver that's matured enormously in the last 18 months, and I think he's going to be a real contender for the championship come the end of the year, providing, of course, that he and Johan can maintain the pace that they exhibited at Estoril.
Exactly. It just seemed that I suspect when we get on to certainly Jerez at the end of the year, that's the sort of track that I think
he does. He is certainly a driver that seems to favour the more technical, twisty circuits than the absolute all-out high-speed circuits. When you look at his, as you say, his performance at Jerez last year and at Barcelona too, as Manhal there makes light work of passing an SR3.
It's funny, isn't it, how you see that, because you think of the UK scene, you come across drivers who really like racing at places like Pembrey and Rockingham and Croft, which are very technical circuits, and they require a slightly different technique to somewhere like Brands Hatch or Thruxton, really.
Yeah, and there's some circuits. I mean, I always recall a conversation with Alex Brundle, who formerly raced SR3s and SR8s with us, and his favourite UK circuit was always Alton, because he said it's a circuit where if you can get into the mindset of the lap there, because there's no natural rhythm, you can make great gains over the drivers that struggle. So it's just one of those places. Some circuits have a very natural rhythm, places like here, for example, and Silverstone, for example. But you go to some more technical circuits, places like Paul Ricard, for example, which is the next one on the calendar, and it is a little bit more tricky, and I'm sure he'll do very well there.
Probably should say that Alex Brundle meant to say Snetterton was his favourite circuit, because otherwise there'll be people like his dad jumping up and down. Well, this is interesting. Halos and Bin Laden are actually running in fairly close contention, and Faisal Bin Laden coming back at Manhal Alos as Alos put the lap on him. And Alos's pace is, wouldn't quite say it's a concern, but he gave away another 3 seconds to James Littlejohn last time through. Here comes James Abbott, and Abbott navigates the hairpin at the source, navigates Yanni Herpier as well. For James Abbott and Colin Noble, this would be quite the victory. But they've still got 10 minutes and plenty of traffic to overcome.
Yeah, he doesn't need to get too carried away, does he? He can just bide his time and pass these cars cleanly. There's no need to really force the issue in the overtake, and sure enough, he did that perfectly there, just lifting slightly for Eau Rouge and then able to drive past the SR3s on the exit.
Well, John Caldwell is on the cusp of winning this weekend's star prize of anything with Brian Poulter, because he hasn't obeyed his stop-and-go penalty yet, and it's beginning to get to the point where possibly patience will be wearing thin in race control about that, because in terms of the hierarchy of obeying race signals, that the number one you obey is obviously waved yellow flags and red flags, and number two is a black flag for any sort of infringement.
Yes, I would suggest this is probably his last opportunity to serve that penalty before things get progressively more severe. Meanwhile, up at the front there. Oh, and again another twitch there from James.
It's interesting, isn't it? James doesn't seem to like it when the tyres go away from him, does he?
It did seem, certainly in the first race, he was struggling a little bit with Pou B as he just got the power down again. You know, you got to remember these cars don't really feature any driver aids. They're paddle shift gearbox, but you've got no ABS and no traction control in the RXC Spider. So you know, it is all down to your left foot ultimately.
I imagine he's also feeling a little bit tired, because it's a heck of a lot of track time for James Abbott today, with the International GT Open on top of 2 Radical races. A busy weekend for him. But it's always one of the great characteristics of the Radical European Masters is that it offers so much track time for drivers that even if they're looking to make the step up from national radical racing, because there's the free practice available, it means that they're not going to feel at a disadvantage coming as a rookie.
No, and so many gentlemen drivers find it difficult to find the time to go testing between events. Yeah, they're very time poor in that they've got busy lives, family and work commitments that make it really tricky to get that testing in midweek. So to have it as part of the actual race weekend framework is a real boon for them, and it obviously means they can get up to speed and be confident and ultimately safer as well, you know, faster.
Abbott on his 18th lap of the race. Now Manhal Alos is due past us any moment now. Indeed, he comes through now with a 2 minutes 25.8. James Winslow in third is definitely closing onto his tail. 2 minutes 23.3, 9.3 seconds back from Alos. We've now got the black flag out for John Caldwell. And exactly as you called it, Will, he missed his 3-lap window to come in, and yes, thereafter it starts to escalate a little bit in terms of the penalties. 7 minutes left on the clock, and for James Abbott here, they've almost got the luxury of now managing their pace to make sure they cross the line sort of just as the clock ticks down to 0, to avoid having to do any additional laps.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm sure that the team will be on the radio to him to try and eke out that final lap as much as possible, without, of course, eating into that lead. The last thing they need is a bit of a hiccup on that last lap. So you know, there's no real excuse. And as we've seen so many times, it's that last lap when you start to get really nervous. You can often see the nerves creeping in with small mistakes made by the driver as you feel every vibration, every noise, and it's a real tense time for the driver on their final lap.
Yeah, especially with such a long last lap like this as well. You're very, very busy.
You just can't afford to let your guard drop. I think that's the big message, really.
And we've seen time and time again here at Spa that this is a track that can bite. There's Lee Bailey in 12th place.
Yeah, great to have this father and son team, the Bailey, Lee and Aaron, competing real sort of stalwarts of the UK radical racing scene, and dovetailing that with the race here. So yeah, it's great to see those guys here on the grid.
And they're not quite going to be on the Supersport podium, but they're not a million miles away from it either. In the Supersport class, it is Riccardo Dodo who now leads that from Marcello Marattiotto and Martin Verity.
And again, another relatively recent convert to European Masters in Verity. To be here, and I think it's the nature of Spa because it's so convenient geographically to the UK. It's a great opportunity for some of the UK guys to cut their teeth for the first time in the European Masters.
And actually, for a lot of the drivers based in the southeast, it's easier to get to Spa really than it is to get to Alton Park or Anglesey or Croft or somewhere like that.
Yeah, that's right. And they're often surprised, I think, just how competitive they are on the European scene. Particularly if you've got a few years of UK domestic racing under your belt.
Yeah, exactly that. Because I think in the United Kingdom, you'll come against some very, very experienced drivers who, for whatever reason, just don't want to go racing in Europe, and they'll return time and time again. And actually, they're a very, very good yardstick. And then when you go and race in Europe, I mean, I had this experience when I was doing European Formula V, that the UK Formula V Championship at the time was so competitive and aggressive that we were immediately quite near the front in Europe. It was the extra, but then it gets into learning that extra 10%, how to do the nuances, the setup for the generally longer circuits, and also learning those tracks. Yeah,
you're absolutely right, and we're great. Last weekend, as you and I saw, we've got another breed of SR1 guys. Took their first steps into racing last weekend with the first 2 rounds of the year at Brands Hatch. So there'll be another generation of radical racers making their way through in a few years, and hopefully we'll see them here too.
I think it's really nice that there is that progression and there's that ladder up through the radical motorsport hierarchy, because.
Well, you only have to look at today's grid when you've got Martin Verity, Brian Cordwell, John Cordwell,
Mark Crader,
and Colin Noble, of course, who are all graduates of that SR1 Rookie to Racer scheme. So it just shows you just how well that process works.
And also, it's nice that there's a destination to aim for within sort of the same family. Obviously, you change car when you graduate from the SR1 Cup. But other than that, you're pretty much good to go and work you out the ladder. And then once you get up to Europe, if you want to invest in the Spider, then absolutely go for it.
Well, and the skills are the same. That's the other thing. It's crucially it's the driving skills, the nuances of driving a high downforce car like this, a mini prototype. It is a little bit different from racing a single seater, and obviously very different from tin tops. And getting those skills in the early place, the confidence to push on the tyres, and really just to enjoy the grip and to enjoy the lateral loads, not to fear them. That's what gives these guys a real head start.
Jim Booth has got Alain Costa win the coffee. In fact, Jim Booth has found a way past Alain Costa, so Booth goes into 6th position. Costa slips down to 7th place, and that's coming on the penultimate lap of the race, because we're very shortly about to have less than a lap time on the clock. And after the dramatic conclusion of the earlier race, this is one of those races which I think could be very significant for the championship as we get a little bit later on in the year, because we've got a lot of quick cars that are going to be netting some good points. Alos's advantage over, well, that's interesting. James Winslow's been caught by James Littlejohn, and they're 8 seconds back from Alos. So that's probably the battle on the track, is the one between cars 69 and 2. Winslow and Littlejohn, because they're running in very, very close company, and certainly if Littlejohn were to find a way past James Winslow, that could be a big boost for his and Tony Wells' championship chances.
Yeah, considering how many extra success seconds they were carrying in the pit stops, that mammoth 85-second stationary time, then I'm sure they'd be very, very pleased to have pulled off a podium if that's at all possible.
I think they just enjoy that they are, if circumstances fall in their favour, that they're able to get on the podium as they want with those success seconds, which is, it helps when you don't have a safety car, certainly. But also it helps actually in a race like this, where you don't have the cars in particularly close contact, and you can really run at a target pace for the race. So Booth runs down through Eau Rouge. Now, whether or not, I think we're about to embark on the final lap. James Abbott is currently in the final sector of the lap, and so with less than a minute on the clock, we will be starting the last lap of the 5th race of the Radical European Masters season. And indeed, James Abbott just goes past us now, arrives into La Source. This has been an emphatic performance, and I think with each and every race, we're seeing that everybody's just understanding how to get the maximum out of the Spider on each and every circuit, and really starting to exploit its characteristics rather than almost go, well, it doesn't behave like an SR8, because it won't, because it's a profoundly different car.
That's right, it's a bigger car, much bigger platform. Yes, it's a little bit heavier, but of course you've got all that extra torque and grunt from the twin turbo engine. So I think there'll be a great deal of confidence coming out this weekend, particularly going to Paul Ricard, again another incredibly high speed circuit. That yeah, there'll be a lot to take away from this, and a lot of positivity for those RXC Spider racers.
And how many of your drivers are having a 2-week road trip?
Yeah, I think there's a few that are looking forward to making the trip down to the Côte d'Azur, and yeah, it'll be interesting to be back there as well. It's a few years since we last competed at Port Ricard, and we've had changeable weather. The first year that European Masters went there, it was glorious sunshine, 30 degrees. The next time it was torrential rain, so it could be as much of a gamble as here.
2013, if memory serves correctly.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And the weather was absolutely torrential. But we had 3 really interesting races in the difficult conditions. But yeah, it'll be this I think is as you say, is the first time that we've really seen the potential and the true showing of the Spider's pace.
Well, I think what's been really interesting is that, particularly with Colin Noble, it's looked so assured through the corners as well today. It's not just been the straight line speed, it's been that the drivers have been able to set the car up to work on the exit speed, to sacrifice the corner entry, have a stable run through the corner, and then just get it punching out as quickly as possible.
And let's not forget as well, this is his first time in the Spider. He has never driven this car before this weekend, so to be able to just get in it and immediately be on the pace is pretty, well, deeply impressive, really.
Profoundly even, as James Abbott comes out of Blanchimont for the final time, heads towards the bus stop chicane, and this is going to be about as dominant a victory as you'll see in this championship as he negotiates the final couple of turns. And it is James Abbott and Colin Noble Jr. who are victorious in the second race of the Radical European Masters this weekend here at Spa-Francorchamps. They take the win, and in very, very emphatic fashion. We wait for the second place car as Lee Bailey picks his way through the chicane, and he and Aaron Bailey are going to take 5th in the Supersport class. And then just behind, it's Manhalos and Alex Capardia. Another very solid result for them. As coming out of the final turn, Little John and Winslow are side by side. This is the fight for third position. Who's going to win the sprint to the line?
It's a drag race, and
it's Winslow.
Just pips him.
So James Winslow and John Corbett complete the podium from James Littlejohn and Tony Wells.
0.162 of a second there. Wow, what a photo finish.
And the battles still continue. Konstantin Gudkayev and Mark Crader for 15th and 16th place, and Gudkayev just holds on, and then Faisal Bin Laden follows them through as in to Parc Fermé, very happy. James Abbott rolls to a halt, and Colin Noble will celebrate. We've got still a couple of cars yet to make it across the line, including a Supersport podium. Double thumbs up from James Abbott. Been a little while since he's won a race as well, but that was a very, very nicely balanced performance. He receives the congratulations.
Hey? Yeah? Really? Yeah. And you backed off and backed off.
Yeah, very, very close on fuel there again. So as we see a replay here at the start.
So look back at the highlights, and it really all came down to Colin Noble making the jump on the long hold to the rolling start. He leapt to the inside of Alex Capardia, and thereafter that car was not out of the lead of the race. Of course, in the early stages, it was very busy, as you'd expect. Drivers looking to gain ground. This was the challenge for the lead. Capardia to the inside of Colin Noble. The move didn't quite work out. Alex Capardia spinning around, and he was able to hold on in second place. He also had a good scrap between Jim Booth and Marco Cienchetti. They were joined by Ivan Lukasevich as well. It's the fight for the Supersport class lead. But Cienchetti, despite the very best efforts of Lukasevich, was still able to hold on. James Winslow taking over from John Corbett, set off in pursuit of Manhal Alos late on in the race. He couldn't quite do it, as James Abbott and Colin Noble, it was a very, very comfortable victory. A pair of them taking the win by almost 30 seconds. So they took the checker flag and celebrated the win. Second place went to Mal Howells and Alex Capadia. Third to John Corbett and James Winslow. Tony Wells and James Littlejohn in fourth from Drew Ferguson in fifth. Then Jim Booth, Alan Coster and Johan Shear. Riccardo Donno, the Supersport winner from Marcello Maricciotto and Marco Cenchetti, with Martin Verity completing that podium. Then Brian Caldwell, Aaron and Lee Bailey, Yanni Herpier and John Caldwell ending his race in the pits a lap early from Gukaev and Lukashevich, then Mark Crader, Bin Laden and Jawa, and unfortunately we lost John Gandar early on. So from Ben Evans and Will Brown, thank you very much for joining us for today's Radical Action, and we'll look forward to more of the same tomorrow, the concluding race of the weekend in the Radical European Masters.
Steering seemed okay to me.
You said the first steer off and you didn't it?
Yeah, that's
You
good.
did the switch off, no?
Is it on 0?
It's on max now, but before it was, you normally only ran it on 4, and it was quite light.
You didn't turn it off or anything, did you?
No. It was like that when I came out of the pit.
Maybe get knocked with somebody's leg or something.